The thunder of hooves across the dusty plain echoed like a heartbeat as Bethany Adams raced toward the horizon, the crimson sunset casting long shadows ahead of her. She wasn't running to something, she was running away, away from the whispers, the stares, the pity that followed her like a stubborn shadow through the streets of Copper Creek. It was 1879, and in this corner of Wyoming territory, a woman with scars like hers might as well wear them painted in bright colors for all the subtlety folks showed when they saw her. The mare beneath her snorted, foam flecking its muzzle as Bethany pushed it harder than she should. She didn't care. The physical pain of the saddle beneath her was nothing compared to the ache inside, the hollow feeling that had taken residence in her chest since the fire 3 years ago. The fire that had claimed her family and marked her body with twisted scars that crawled up her right arm across her shoulder and kissed the edge of her jawline. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the horse, leaning forward, just a little farther. The creek appeared ahead, a silver ribbon cutting through the valley. She hadn't planned to go this far, but the need to escape the stifling confines of town had driven her beyond her usual boundaries. Bethany slowed the mare, allowing the exhausted animal to approach the water. As they neared the bank, she noticed another horse, a sturdy Palomino, already drinking downstream. Its rider stood nearby, his back to her, tall and broad-shouldered beneath a well-worn Stetson. He was rolling a cigarette with practiced ease, seemingly unaware of her approach until the mare's hooves crunched on the rocky shore. He turned, and Bethany instinctively raised her hand to the scarred side of her face, a habit she couldn't break no matter how many times she told herself it didn't matter. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and unhurried. His eyes, the color of the summer sky, met hers directly, not sliding away to her scars or dropping to the ground in discomfort as most did. Pushing that mare mighty hard for this time of day. Bethany stiffened. "She's my horse, I'll ride her as I please." A smile tugged at his lips, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. No argument there, just making conversation. He tipped his hat. "Garrett Quinn, most folks call me Quinn. Bethany Adams," she replied, not knowing why she offered her name so freely. Perhaps it was the straightforward way he looked at her, or maybe it was just the loneliness of 3 years with barely a civil word from anyone in town. "Miss Adams," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "You're a ways from Copper Creek, not the safest country for a woman alone." "I can take care of myself," she said, her hand instinctively touching the small revolver tucked in her saddle bag. Her father had taught her to shoot long before he and her mother had perished in the fire that had nearly claimed her too. Quinn's eyes followed the movement, and he nodded approvingly. "I don't doubt it." He finished rolling his cigarette and offered it to her. "Smoke." Bethany hesitated, then shook her head. "No, thank you," he shrugged, lighting it himself and taking a long drag. "Suit yourself." "Mind if I ask what brings you out this far?" "Sun's going down quick, and there's no decent trail back to town in the dark." The reality of her situation suddenly dawned on Bethany, in her haste to escape the suffocating whispers and stares after Mrs. Holloway had loudly proclaimed her too damaged for decent company at the general store. She hadn't considered her return journey. The familiar panic began to rise in her chest. I lost track of time," she admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. Quinn studied her for a moment, then extinguished his cigarette under his boot. "My camp's just over that ridge, nothing fancy, but there's coffee and food. You're welcome to share it until morning when I can point you back toward town." Alarm flashed across Bethany's face. Stay the night with a stranger, a man she'd just met. Reading her expression, Quinn held up his hands. "You'll have your privacy, Miss Adams. I give you my word as a gentleman. But these hills get mighty dark, and there are wolves, both the 4-legged kind and the 2-legged variety, that come out at night." Bethany weighed her options. She could try to make it back to town, risking getting lost or encountering trouble, or she could accept this stranger's hospitality and deal with whatever new rumors it might spark tomorrow. The decision wasn't difficult when framed that way. "I accept your offer, Mr. Quinn. But understand that I'll shoot you if you give me cause." Quinn grinned, that dimple appearing again. I'd expect nothing less, Miss Adams. Shall we? He led her to a small clearing where a simple camp was already established. A bedroll lay near the remains of a morning fire, and saddlebags rested against a fallen log. Quinn immediately set about rekindling the fire, his movements efficient and practiced. "You a cowhand?" Bethany asked, dismounting and allowing her mare to drink from the stream that ran along one edge of the clearing. "Was," he replied, not looking up from his task. "Worked the Harper Ranch for 5 years, now I'm on my own. Buying and selling horses, mostly. Heading to Montana Territory next month with a string of 6. I saw the horses when I rode in, fine animals." This earned her another smile. "You know horses, then?" "My father raised them," she said, the memory bringing both warmth and pain, before the fire. Quinn's hands stilled for just a moment, but he didn't look up or offer empty platitudes. Instead, he simply said, "Fire's a cruel master. Took my parents' farm in Kansas when I was 14. The simple statement, delivered without pity or expectation, loosened something in Bethany's chest. Here was someone who understood loss, who didn't need to make a spectacle of it. "How did you end up in Wyoming?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Followed work. Cattle drives at first, then ranch work. Saved every penny until I could start buying my own stock." The fire caught, and he fed it carefully until flames danced in the gathering dusk. "What about you? You born in Copper Creek?" "No," Bethany said, settling on a rock near the fire. "My family moved there when I was 16. My father wanted to establish a horse breeding operation. We had 2 good years before." "Before the fire," Quinn finished gently when she trailed off. She nodded, absently running her fingers over the scars on her hand. "I was lucky to survive. The doctor didn't think I would at first." "Doctors don't know everything," Quinn said, rummaging in his saddlebag and producing a coffee pot and tin cups. "My ma always said it's not the body that decides whether to live or die, it's the spirit. Your mother sounds wise. Wisest woman I ever knew." He filled the pot with water from a canteen and set it on the fire. "She'd have liked you." The simple compliment caught Bethany off guard. People didn't say things like that to her anymore. Since the fire, since the scars, conversations with her were stilted, uncomfortable things that others endured rather than enjoyed. As darkness fell completely, Quinn prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and johnny cakes. They ate in companionable silence, the night sounds of the wilderness creating a peaceful backdrop. When they finished, Quinn offered her his bedroll. "I insist," he said when she protested. "I've slept on harder ground with less reason." Too tired to argue, Bethany accepted. As she settled into the surprisingly comfortable bedroll, she watched Quinn spread his duster on the ground nearby, using his saddle as a pillow. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could stop it. Quinn was quiet for so long that Bethany thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "My pa used to say that a person's worth isn't in what you can see, it's in what you can't. The way they face hardship, the kindness they show when no one's looking, the strength it takes to keep going when everything says stop." He shifted, looking at her across the dying fire. "I see a woman who survived something that would have broken most folks. That's worth respecting in my book." Bethany felt tears prick at her eyes and turned away, not wanting him to see her weakness. "Good night, Mr. Quinn." "Good night, Miss Adams." She fell asleep to the gentle crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a lone wolf, feeling safer than she had in years. Morning brought dew-kissed grass and the aroma of fresh coffee. Bethany woke to find Quinn already up, tending to the horses and preparing breakfast. He greeted her with a nod and a cup of steaming coffee. "Sleep well?" he asked, turning bacon in a small skillet. "Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Thank you." They ate quickly, and Quinn helped her saddle her mare. As promised, he pointed out the easiest trail back to Copper Creek, even offering to ride with her part of the way. "That's not necessary," Bethany said, though part of her wished to prolong their time together. There was something refreshing about being in the company of someone who didn't flinch when he looked at her. "As you wish," Quinn replied with a tip of his hat. "Safe journey, Miss Adams." Impulsively, Bethany extended her scarred hand toward him. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Quinn. He took her hand without hesitation, his calloused palm warm against her damaged skin. The pleasure was mine. The ride back to town gave Bethany too much time to think. She couldn't remember the last time she'd spoken so freely with anyone, let alone a man. Since the fire, she'd withdrawn into herself, accepting the town's judgment that she was damaged goods, unmarriageable, an object of pity best kept at a distance. Quinn had looked at her differently. He'd seen her. As she approached Copper Creek, reality settled back over her like a heavy blanket. The familiar buildings, the dusty Main Street, the curious glances as she rode and all reminded her of her place here. The damaged spinster who ran the small millinery shop left to her by her parents, living in the rooms above it, existing rather than living. The first person she encountered was Mrs. Holloway, sweeping the boardwalk in front of her husband's general store. Bethany Adams. "Where on earth have you been? People were starting to wonder if you'd run off for good," the older woman's voice carried, drawing attention from others on the street. "I went for a ride and decided to camp overnight," Bethany answered, keeping her voice even. Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened. "Alone?" "A woman in your condition shouldn't. My condition is just fine, Mrs. Holloway," Bethany interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "And yes, alone. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to open my shop." She left the sputtering woman behind, feeling a small spark of satisfaction. Perhaps something of Quinn's straightforward confidence had rubbed off on her. The next few days passed in their usual pattern, but Bethany found herself thinking of the blue-eyed horseman more often than she cared to admit. She told herself it was simply the novelty of being treated normally, nothing more. Then, a week after their meeting, the bell above her shop door jingled and Garrett Quinn walked in, looking slightly out of place among the feminine trappings of the millinery. "Mr. Quinn," she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "What brings you to town?" He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair in need of a trim. "Supplies, and I wanted to see how you were faring after our adventure." The word adventure made her smile. "I'm quite well, thank you." "Glad to hear it." He glanced around the shop, taking in the hats and trimmings. "So this is your place?" "It is." She gestured to a particularly elaborate creation with ostrich feathers. "Not quite what you'd expect from someone like me, is it?" "Someone like you," he echoed, his brow furrowing. "Scarred, damaged." The words came out more bitterly than she intended. Quinn's expression hardened slightly. "Is that how folks around here talk about you?" Bethany busied herself straightening a display of ribbons. "They don't say it to my face, not usually anyway." "Then they're fools," he said simply. "A person's scars just show where they've been, not who they are." The bell jingled again as Mrs. Holloway and her daughter entered. They stopped short at the sight of Quinn. "Oh, I didn't realize you had a customer, Mrs. Holloway said, her eyes darting between Bethany and Quinn with poorly disguised curiosity. "Mr. Quinn was just leaving," Bethany said quickly, not wanting to give the town gossip more fodder. Quinn, however, seemed in no hurry. He replaced his hat and smiled pleasantly at the newcomers. "Ladies." "Fine day, isn't it?" Mrs. Holloway sniffed. "Indeed, I don't believe we've been introduced, sir." "Garrett Quinn," he said with a slight bow. "Horse trader currently. I'm staying at the livery for a few days while I conduct some business." "I see, Mrs. Holloway said in a tone that suggested she saw far too much. "Well, we won't keep you from your business." Quinn's smile never faltered, though a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. "Much obliged." "Miss Adams," he added, turning back to Bethany, "I wondered if you might join me for supper at the hotel this evening. I have a proposition regarding horses that might interest you given your family background." Before Bethany could respond, Mrs. Holloway made a small, choked sound. Her daughter looked scandalized. "Aye, that is." Bethany faltered, caught between curiosity about his proposition and awareness of the social implications. 7 o'clock, Quinn suggested, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Something in his steady gaze gave Bethany courage. 7 o'clock, she agreed. After Quinn left, Mrs. Holloway didn't even pretend to be interested in hats. "Bethany Adams, do you know what people will say?" "I imagine they'll say exactly what they always say, Mrs. Holloway," Bethany replied, surprising herself with her calm. That I'm damaged goods not fit for decent company. What difference does one more rumor make? The older woman's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Well, I never. Was there something specific you needed today? Bethany asked, gesturing to the hats around them. No. Come along, Judith, Mrs. Holloway said, tugging her daughter's arm. We'll return another time. The moment they left, Bethany sank onto her stool, her heart racing. Had she really just agreed to dine with Garrett Quinn, and had she really spoken to Mrs. Holloway that way? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. At 7 o'clock sharp, Bethany entered the hotel dining room wearing her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her auburn hair and brought out the green in her eyes. She'd arranged her hair to partially cover the scarring on her jaw, a concession to her nerves. Quinn stood when she approached, looking surprisingly refined in a clean white shirt and black vest. "Miss Adams, you look lovely." The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." He held her chair and they settled into a table by the window. Bethany was acutely aware of the stares and whispers around them, but Quinn seemed entirely unbothered. "You mentioned a proposition about horses," she asked once they'd ordered. "I did," he confirmed, leaning forward slightly. "I've acquired more stock than I originally planned for my Montana venture, quality animals, but I need someone with a good eye to help evaluate and possibly train them before I make the journey. And you thought of me." Bethany couldn't hide her surprise. "You said your father raised horses. I figured you might have learned from him." "I did," she admitted. "He taught me everything he knew, but I haven't worked with horses since the fire." Quinn's eyes softened. "Maybe it's time to start again." The idea was both appealing and frightening. Working with horses had been her passion once before grief and pain had narrowed her world to the safe confines of her millinery shop. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "Just come look at them," Quinn suggested. "Tomorrow morning." No obligation beyond that. Before she could answer, the hotel owner's wife approached their table, her expression pinched with disapproval. "Miss Adams, Mr. Quinn," she greeted them stiffly. "I'm afraid we have a rather full dining room tonight. Perhaps you would be more comfortable taking your meal elsewhere." The implication was clear. Bethany's presence was unwelcome. She began to rise, humiliation burning in her chest, but Quinn's hand shot out, covering hers on the table. "We're quite comfortable right here, madam," he said, his tone pleasant but firm. "And as paying customers, we expect the same courtesy you extend to everyone else." His eyes, suddenly cold as winter, locked with the woman's. "Unless there's some other reason you're suggesting we leave." The woman faltered under his steady gaze. No, of course not. Enjoy your meal." She retreated hastily. "You shouldn't have done that," Bethany said quietly once the woman was gone. "Now they'll talk about you too." Quinn shrugged, his fingers still resting lightly on hers. "Let them." "I've never much cared what small-minded people think." "It's different for you," Bethany pointed out. "You're leaving, I have to live here." "Do you?" he asked, his gaze intensifying. "Is this really where you want to be, among people who treat you like this?" The question struck her like a physical blow. She'd never seriously considered leaving Copper Creek. After the fire, after losing her parents, she'd clung to the familiar, even as the town's attitude toward her changed from sympathy to discomfort to barely disguised revulsion. "I don't know where else I would go," she said finally. "Montana's beautiful country," Quinn said casually, as if suggesting nothing more significant than a change in the weather. "Wide open spaces, people too busy building something new to worry about old scars." Bethany withdrew her hand, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Mr. Quinn, if you're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Miss Adams," he interrupted gently. "Just making conversation, now about those horses." The rest of the meal passed pleasantly enough, though Bethany remained aware of the sidelong glances and whispers. Quinn regaled her with stories of his travels, painting vivid pictures of the territories he'd seen and the characters he'd encountered. His easy manner gradually relaxed her, and by the time they finished their apple pie, she was laughing openly at his tale of a card game gone wrong in Deadwood. As he walked her back to her shop in the soft evening light, Bethany felt lighter than she had in years. Quinn maintained a respectful distance beside her, his presence somehow both exciting and comforting. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said when they reached her door. "The pleasure was mine," he replied, tipping his hat. "Will you come see the horses tomorrow?" Bethany hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I'd like that." His smile was worth the risk. "I'll come by after you close your shop." True to his word, Quinn appeared the next afternoon as Bethany was turning the sign in her window to "closed." He escorted her to the livery stable on the edge of town, where several fine horses were corralled. "These are yours?" Bethany asked, approaching the fence. Her practiced eye took in their conformation, noting their strong lines and alert expressions. "All but that bay gelding," Quinn confirmed. "He belongs to the livery owner." Bethany moved closer, extending her hand to a beautiful sorrel mare who approached curiously. The horse sniffed her scarred hand without hesitation, then nudged it gently, looking for treats. "She likes you," Quinn observed, coming to stand beside her. "She's lovely," Bethany said, stroking the mare's velvety nose. "Spirited but gentle, you have a good eye." "So do you," he replied. "Which is why I was hoping you might help me work with them for a few weeks before I head north." The request was tempting, more tempting than it should have been. "I have a shop to run." "In the mornings, then, before you open, or in the evenings like today?" Bethany hesitated. Working with horses again would mean facing memories she'd long buried, both painful and precious. But as the sorrel mare nuzzled her hand, something long dormant stirred within her. "All right," she agreed finally, "I'll help you." Quinn's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern. Bethany would meet Quinn at the livery each morning before dawn, working with the horses for an hour or two before returning to open her shop. In the evenings, after closing, she would often return for another session. Under Quinn's watchful eye, she rediscovered skills she thought she'd lost and found pieces of herself she'd buried after the fire. The town noticed, of course. Whispers followed her through the streets, and business at her shop slowed as some of the more respectable ladies found reasons to take their custom elsewhere. But for every customer Bethany lost, she gained something more valuable: confidence, purpose, joy. And something else, something she was afraid to name, grew between her and Quinn. It wasn't just his refusal to be bothered by her scars, though that was part of it. It was the way he listened when she spoke, the respect in his eyes when she worked with a particularly difficult horse, the easy laughter they shared over simple meals after a long day's work. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, they sat on the corral fence watching the horses graze. Quinn had been unusually quiet all day, and Bethany sensed something weighing on his mind. "Is everything all right?" she asked finally. "You seem troubled." He glanced at her, then back at the horses. "I leave for Montana in 3 days." The words hit Bethany harder than she expected. Of course she'd known he was leaving, he'd never pretended otherwise. But somehow, in the comfortable rhythm they'd established, she'd allowed herself to forget the temporary nature of their arrangement. "Oh," she said, unable to formulate a more coherent response. "Well, the horses are certainly ready. You've done a fine job with them." "We've done a fine job," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have managed without you, Bethany." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. "I'm glad I could help," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "It's been nice, working with horses again." Quinn turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "Come with me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and enticing. "What?" Bethany whispered, certain she'd misheard. "Come with me to Montana," he repeated, taking her scarred hand in his. "I've watched you these past weeks. You come alive with the horses in a way you never do in that shop, and the way this town treats you." He shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "You deserve better, Mr. Quinn." "Garrett," he interrupted. "After all this time, I think you can call me Garrett." "Garrett," she amended, the name feeling both foreign and right on her tongue. "You can't possibly mean this. You barely know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you're strong and brave and kinder than most. I know you have a gift with horses that shouldn't be wasted." And I know that when I'm with you, I'm happier than I've been in years." Bethany's heart thundered in her chest. What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership for now," he said cautiously. "I have land staked out near Bozeman, good grazing, water rights, everything we'd need to start a horse breeding operation. Your expertise, my connections, we could build something special. And if it doesn't work out?" She asked, practical despite the hope blooming in her chest. "Then I'll ensure you have the means to make your own way wherever you choose," he promised. "But Bethany—" He hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity, "I believe it could work in every way that matters." The implication wasn't lost on her. "People will talk. Let them," he said with a shrug. "In Montana, they'll just see a man and woman building a life together. Your scars won't matter there any more than they matter to me." "And how do they matter to you?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Garrett's free hand rose to gently trace the line of scarring along her jaw. "They're part of you, part of your strength, part of what makes you the woman I've come to care for deeply." Tears pricked at Bethany's eyes. "I'm afraid," she admitted in a whisper. "Of what?" "Of hoping. Of believing this could be real." "It is real," he assured her, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. "As real as you and me and these horses. As real as this." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deeper as Bethany responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally parted, Bethany felt dizzy with emotion. "Garrett," she breathed, uncertain what else to say. "I know it's sudden," he acknowledged, resting his forehead against hers. "And I know you need time to think, but I leave in 3 days, Bethany, and I want you with me when I go." "I need to think," she agreed, overwhelmed by the possibilities suddenly opening before her. "Of course," he said, straightening and helping her down from the fence. "Take all the time you need." As he walked her back to her shop in the gathering darkness, Bethany's mind raced with questions, fears, and a dangerous, unfamiliar emotion that felt suspiciously like hope. The next 2 days passed in a blur as Bethany wrestled with Garrett's proposition. She moved through her routines mechanically, barely registering the customers who came and went, her thoughts constantly returning to the choice before her. Stay in Copper Creek, where she was tolerated at best, pitied and scorned at worst, clinging to the safe familiarity of her small existence. Or venture into the unknown with a man who looked at her scars and saw strength, who offered her not just escape but possibility. When Garrett came to the shop on the evening of the second day, Bethany still hadn't decided. "I need 1 more day," she told him, apologetic. "It's not an easy decision." "I understand," he said, though disappointment flickered in his eyes. "I'll be at the livery tomorrow morning." "We leave at noon." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever you decide, Bethany, know that these weeks with you have been a gift I never expected." After he left, Bethany closed the shop and climbed the stairs to her small apartment above. She moved restlessly from window to window, looking out at the town that had been her prison as much as her home these past 3 years. From one window, she could see the church where the preacher had kindly suggested she might be more comfortable attending the evening service when fewer people would be present. From another, the general store where Mrs. Holloway held court, dispensing judgment along with dry goods. And from the third, the livery stable where Garrett Quinn had reminded her what it felt like to be alive. Morning came after a sleepless night, and Bethany rose with the dawn, her decision made. She packed a small trunk with her most essential belongings, wrote a brief note to her landlord, and pinned it to her door along with the key to the shop. The building and business would revert to him, as per their agreement if she ever left. It wasn't much of a legacy, but it had never really been hers anyway, just a remnant of the life she'd lost in the fire. The walk to the livery seemed both endless and too short. When she arrived, Garrett was already loading his wagon, preparing for departure. He paused when he saw her, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression as he took in her traveling clothes and the trunk she pulled on a small cart behind her. "Bethany," she stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly unsure despite her resolve. "You said there was room for a partner in your venture." A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. There is, and this, partnership, what exactly would it entail? Garrett set down the saddle he'd been carrying and crossed to her, taking both her hands in his scarred and unscarred alike. Whatever you want it to, he said honestly, but I hope in time it might grow into something more, something permanent. People will say you settled for damaged goods, Bethany warned, needing to be sure he understood what he was taking on. Garrett's expression hardened. Anyone who says that will answer to me, but Bethany, his voice softened, you're not damaged, you're a survivor. And if you'll have me, I'd be proud to build a life with you. The sincerity in his eyes undid the last of her doubts. I want that too, she whispered, a new beginning away from all this. His smile was radiant as he bent to kiss her, right there in the open where anyone could see. Bethany found she didn't care who might be watching. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen not for her scars, but for herself. We should get moving if we want to make good time before nightfall, Garrett said when they finally parted. He loaded her trunk into the wagon alongside his own belongings, then helped her up to the seat. As they drove out of town, past curious onlookers and shocked faces, Bethany felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenge, hard work, but also possibility, respect, and a love that saw beyond surface scars to the strength beneath. Garrett's hand found hers on the seat between them, his strong fingers intertwining with her scarred ones. No regrets, he asked softly. Bethany looked back at Copper Creek one last time, then turned her gaze forward to the open horizon. None, she answered and meant it. 3 months later, under a canopy of Montana stars, Bethany Adams became Bethany Quinn in a simple ceremony attended by their new neighbors. As Garrett slipped a ring onto her finger, he bent to place a gentle kiss on the scar that traced her jawline. My beautiful, strong wife, he whispered for her ears alone. Thank you for taking a chance on us. In that moment, surrounded by acceptance and wrapped in love, Bethany finally understood. Her scars had never defined her, they had merely been waiting to lead her home.